You were given an order from FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. that seemed quite strange. Talk about what happened then.
Yeah, I've never had to issue a hijack squawk to an aircraft. I mean, we can issue an emergency code if we think the aircraft is having an issue, and what they do when they squawk, there's three particular codes that they can squawk, and it's basically emergency radio failure hijack. And it actually tags up on other controller scopes, and also scopes down the lower 48, if like at the command center, anybody, probably the military. I can't really speak to how their equipment works, but it just kind of tags them up a little bit differently. So it's a more pronounced target on the scope. So I've never had to do it before, and I never had to do it after that. It was a strange request at the time. I never read it in the books where you had to do that. I've never, we wouldn't necessarily ever issue that code to an aircraft, because the way I look at it, it's not ours to issue, it's the pilot's to issue, because it's a very serious code. So the 7500 squawk was the hijack code. Was actually a supervisor came down and said we need to have the Korean Air squawk 7500, and I said, well, I didn't really think it was the right thing to do. So they actually left and regrouped and talked about it, and I had my opinions of why it wasn't, but then later I was ordered to do it. So.
And what were your thoughts? Why did you not want to do that?
We'd already had some miscommunication with the military that morning. There'd already been some threats to shoot down some aircraft, one that I was particularly working, or probably others that happened to, that if they didn't follow whatever air traffic commands that we issued at the time, that they would be shot down. And I had an aircraft that was just south of Anchorage. On his way in, he was told to land at Anchorage. And at 40 miles south of Anchorage, I was told to turn him or that he would be shot down. And I was realizing there was a lot of miscommunications with the civilian sector and the military sector. There were fighters with this Korean Air, and with the kind of communications that occur, or breakdowns we'd say, occasionally that occur between the civilians and the military. My first thought, and after, I guess you'd say 19 years of experience, I knew how the military operates to an extent, and I thought, well, what if the guy's trigger happy? That's not a bad thing. That's their job, and that's not my job, is to destroy aircraft of that series. And if they saw this code, I was afraid that it would, well, I was very afraid. I was more than afraid. It was probably the worst thing I ever had to do in my life, to issue the code.
Do you know who gave the order from the FAA in Washington, D.C.?
I think I do, but I'm not sure how it was derived. I don't know who told the person. I'm not sure if the person that gave that order, headquarters, is actually, it was just, I believe, if I'm hearing this or I'm understanding it right, these instructions were coming for what they called headquarters, which is the Traffic Management Control Center in the lower 48. It's pretty much the whole command center or traffic management system for all of the U.S. airspace. I was actually assigned traffic management locally at the center at that time. I was a traffic management coordinator, but I just happened to work traffic also. So I interact with these people, and as far as who made the decision, I don't know, but I do understand a little bit of why. I understand why they wanted to do this. And my thoughts, I explained about what my concerns were, but I believe the concerns of management were more, they wanted everybody to see the aircraft. They wanted the military to be aware of it. They wanted this, this aircraft to brighten up on their scope, so to speak, or become very prominent so they could find it and track it. And I thought in the back of my mind, that must be why they're wanting to do it, but it's really not the right thing to do. So yes, it came from the Traffic Management Center, I think is what they were calling headquarters, from the best I could tell. I never asked anybody. I really didn't want to know at the time.
Do you think the order came from headquarters, what you're referring to as headquarters, or do you think it originated farther up the chain of command than from them?
What little bit I've read, and I haven't listened to tapes, I just read a few logs that were publicly available, and I really can't determine who gave the order. So it could have been within the headquarters, it could have been outside. Everything would be speculation for me, but from what I read, it almost looked like it was determined locally at what we call headquarters. But there could have been outside, pressure to have this aircraft squawk a code that would be recognizable, where he would actually be more prominent on displays for, any military personnel or any personnel at any point that had access to the radar data we were looking at. So, yeah.
You were a commercial pilot before you were an air traffic controller for 25 years. Can you ever imagine a circumstance where it would seem appropriate for an air traffic controller to order a jet, a jet full of passengers to squawk that they have hijackers on board, especially in light of the fact that they're being escorted by F-15s?
No, it's absolutely, that was a problem I was having with it. I could not fathom any scenario that would really warrant that to happen. Management, on the other hand, I'm not sure what their experience is. The people, calling the shots, will say. I don't know what experience they had, but I have ground experience, and that's what I was drawing from as a pilot, as a controller for a while. Understand interactions between military and civilian sectors, and how breakdowns can occur and accidents can happen. That's what I was looking at, the whole picture. I wasn't, removed from it. I guess if I was far removed from the situation, I might have reacted differently or wanted it to happen as a convenience method for other people to see it. But no, there's no reason why a controller would ever want to issue that I can come up with. You might could ask a dozen controllers and somebody might say yes, but it really made no sense to me.
Looking back now, nearly 10 years, why have you decided to speak out about this now?
It's always something that's kind of haunted me, and it's the reason that it's a kind of a haunting issue is I've had aircraft that I've been working before that have had a lot of issues that have crashed. We'll say that I've had pilots, I've heard screams going as they've been going down, you might say, in the past. But all those were beyond my control. I didn't issue direct orders. I didn't tell someone to do something that could result in the destruction of their aircraft. My job was for safety and to make sure the flights were moved safely and efficiently. That's what an air traffic controller does. In my opinion, what I had to do was something that could have resulted in a big accident. And that's why I actually did not issue it when I was first told to. There was a delay in the time that the order was issued to have this aircraft squawk the code, and it occurred because I refused to do it. And I explained to the supervisors that were there why I was explaining to do it. And when they came back, I was ordered to do it. I realized somebody was going to do it. I didn't like people doing my dirty work, and I knew they were going to get somebody to do it. So under the threats, I did it. And that's why it's just a haunting thing. So occasionally, once a year, I'll go search and see if anybody even cared about what happened to that flight. So.
Well, thank you very much, Rick Wilder. Thank you for speaking with me about this.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in and for watching. Good night. Another air traffic controller who says he worked with Korean Flight 085 that was diverted to Whitehorse on September 11, 2001, has come forward with additional details of the day's events. APRN reported Friday that retired air traffic controller Rick Wilder says the pilot was ordered to squawk that he had hijackers on board. Dave Conant worked as an air traffic controller in Anchorage for 15 years and was also in the tower and worked the flight that was suspected of being hijacked that day. Conant contends he was the one that first ordered the pilot to squawk the 7500 hijack code. Conant says it was because of a message the pilot had sent to his own company, Korean Airlines.
He, as I understood it, sent a company message saying that he was hijacked, and that got to us. So we were expecting a hijacked aircraft when we finally did radar identify him and talk to him.
Conant says he asked the pilot to verify squawking 7500, and he says the pilot said disregard. Then Conant's area manager directed Conant to instruct the pilot to squawk the hijack code. Conant says he gave the order, and the pilot did not argue. He complied.
So at that point, we figured, well, he must be getting hijacked. And so I was given instructions that he could not go to Anchorage. So I tried to turn him away from Anchorage, and he was very resistant. It took several transmissions to convince him that he could not and he was not going to go to Anchorage.
Conant says he's also a pilot and had never before given such a command. He says the order to tell the plane to squawk 7500, meaning it had been hijacked, surprised him. But he looked later, and it was in the FAA manual. He says when those regulations were written, it was presumed that a hijacker would be someone bursting into a cockpit with a weapon.
And one of those would be that a scenario that if a hijacker is standing in the cockpit and he's telling the pilot what to do, and the controller tells him to do something, like squawk 7500, the hijacker normally wouldn't know what that means. So if the pilot did it, it would confirm that he is being hijacked. But if he wasn't being hijacked, it's incumbent upon the pilot to know the code and say, no, I'm not being hijacked.
The pilot's lack of protest about the code added to the suspicion that the Korean jet had been hijacked. This confusion is what then NORAD commander, now Air Force General Norton Schwartz, outlined when he spoke to reporters in the days after the event. Schwartz said if controllers asked pilots to confirm that they were squawking that code, the correct response would be negative, negative, I am not that code.
Apparently what occurred was that the crew either misconstrued what was said, or perhaps what was said wasn't exactly, according to the textbook, and they understood that they should squawk that code.
Conant says he wanted to clarify some of the day's events and affirm that the jet had been sent to Whitehorse because of concerns it was in fact a hijacked plane, and it was determined that sending it to Whitehorse endangered less lives than Anchorage.
Then a second plane is spotted.
Out of the corner of my eye, I catch a plane coming down the Hudson River. And I keep an eye on the plane, and I watch it circle around the Statue of Liberty. And I watch it drive right into that South Tower.
Let's go! Underground! I'm with you! Go, 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 go!
10
o'clock this morning, photographer Glenn Mayrose and I, along with FBI agents, police officers, fire officials, we all thought for sure a bomb was set to explode underneath our feet outside 7 World Trade Center. We took off running for our lives north on Church Street. We had no idea the top of one of the Twin Towers had just exploded. We ran 5, 6 blocks, Glenn lugging his camera equipment, videotapes, and batteries as a cloud of smoke, dust, and debris crept up behind us. People running, crying, and screaming, wiping tears from their eyes. Out of breath and unsure of what just happened and what we just experienced, we finally...
And they usually debate and argue before they do. Sometimes they have to be bombed into going to war.
Secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
What is important to remember is what Chief Turry said and what he didn't say. What he said was that he thought he heard secondary explosions in the building prior to the collapse. What he didn't say was that he heard bombs.
When I reached the middle of the bridge, I started to hear this rumbling beneath my feet, a lot of vibration. Then I noticed the second tower began to fall.
There was a third, what looked like a third plane. I thought there was a terrible noise. It sounded like a plane very low. Then there was the explosion. And again, like the lady said, an avalanche of smoke and debris came up the canyons, up the side streets.
You were on Broadway?
I was out by Broadway, and I guess Fulton. I had been backed up to Broadway.
Out of their shoes to escape the fire bombs and the explosions. We are live in the financial district. I'm Nina Pineda.
Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area. Tower 2 has had a major explosion and what appears to be a complete collapse surrounding the entire area.
It's not working, no signal.
88, One World Trade.
72. You're on 88? Yeah. How'd you live through that?
Sheer luck.
That's where the planes hit. We made it. We got that first secondary explosion really got us spooked because we were in the building. We came down and we were meandering, eyeballing, and then all of a sudden it hit again. We kept on running, and the tower came. Next thing we know, we don't see 1 nor 2. We were hanging around up there thinking everything was over.
Well, we tried
That's what we were doing. We went in to make a phone call. We almost didn't come back.
When we were in, and we were on 20th floor? 21, and you know, all of we were looking out the window. We were getting our air because it was a clear floor. Because it was a clear floor. And then all of a sudden, boom! And then we just hightailed out of there. Went in one stairway, was full of smoke. Got down, still was just meandering out of there. Looked up, we saw 1 down, we saw 2 down, and we saw the vista take, gouged. And then all of a sudden, the tower came down on 1, went into a building. Everybody was running, firemen, everybody.
1 p.m.
Bomb in the building, start clearing out. Bomb in the building, start clearing out.
They're saying there's a bomb maybe in the high school on either side of the building. So they're pulling back.
The blocks around Ground Zero are unrecognizable. Streets are covered in ash, and the Twin Towers reduced to rubble.
Watch your back. Good job, bro.
What are you doing downtown? What are you doing downtown? What are you doing downtown?
Let's go, move. Terrence.